I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this very special 10th anniversary I Mix What I Like publication and special members only book discussion about I Mix What I Like, a mixtape manifesto. Now, the way I think these membership things work, I can't see how many people are actually here. So the only way I'm going to know if you're here is if you chime out in the comments and chat. So please do and let me know you're here, and if you have any comments or questions. Certainly, if you see this eventually later on, whether next up on our Patreon page at blackpowermedia.org or eventually just in general to the wider public. If you see this later and have any, of course, comments, questions, etc., queries, conundrums, catechisms, cacophony, calumny, consternation, contemplation, please, as Brother Pierre says,
put it in the comments.
We'd love to hear it, or I'd love to hear it. Again, let's see. Let me see here. Yeah, again, if you're here, if you're in a comment or if you're in attendance, please do chime in with the comments, critiques, etc. So, all right. So what I wanted to do, what I figured I would do is give a brief introduction, and then I sort of have this broken down into the bad and the good as we talk about the history and experience of publishing this book. By the way, I just want to make sure, are folks here? Can somebody say something in the comment to let me know? Because I'm not really sure if this is even, yeah. Just double check something real quick. Oh, okay, cool. My bad. Okay, good. Okay, I just wasn't sure. I just want to make sure everything is okay. Cool. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. First of all, first of all, thank you all for becoming members to the channel. That's right. By the way, do you all watch Comedy Hype? I don't know if you watch Comedy Hype as a channel. I think it's Oh, okay, got you. Thank you. Let me give it a couple minutes. But do you all watch the Comedy Hype channel? I hope you all do, because not only is it Black owned and run, but it's. I think they do a really good job of covering, covering a lot of the histories of Black actors and comedians, and but then, you know, interviewing them, bringing them into the discussion. I mean, I've learned a lot about some of the behind the scenes stuff. Yeah. Okay, good. So yeah, all right, very good. So I want to highlight this question very quickly, real quick, but I'm going to try to come back to some of these later, so that I don't maybe get too distracted or go too far out of order here. But I will start off by saying Teray and Hamilton discussed the limitations of the colonial analogy, which I think you addressed by analyzing music as a natural resource to be extracted. Did that critique inform your work here? Absolutely. Black Power by Teray and Hamilton absolutely informed my work, and I will get to some of that shortly. You know what? I haven't seen the Tommy Davidson, the whole thing yet. I've only seen the excerpts, but that's in my watch later file, so I'll get to that soon. But yeah, sorry, Randall. Yeah. But absolutely, Touré and Hamilton factor, and Kwame Touré in particular factors heavily in the work. So for sure. Yeah. Anyway, so as I've been joking in terms of the comedy hype thing, you know, Pierre is I've been trying to joke that I want to be the Black radical politics what Pierre is to comedy. And I think that in many ways, puns intended, that is relevant. So or appropriate, I should say. All right, so okay. So I want to start off by saying that I am all these years later exceedingly proud of this work. Sorry, just one quick second. So I am, again, I'm very proud of this work. I'm proud of what I was trying to do. Given that I was making what I think is still a truly seminal argument that one centers the tradition of rap music hip hop mixtapes, connects them to traditions of dissident and underground journalism and media making, and then specifically to the philosophy of journalism, emancipatory journalism, which is a phrase as a philosophy was coined by Professor Hemant Shah, a professor of journalism in Madison, Wisconsin. And what I also like about the book is that, one, I think it's the truest expression of my own politics and worldview. I'm not saying they were expressed fully well, but I am saying that the truest expression of what I think politically is still, I think, represented in this book. And it's born out of my own, history of, which really starts with delivering pizza full time in the early 90s when I came back from the military. And out here in Howard County, Maryland, where I would go several times a week into Baltimore to North Avenue, to Everyone's Place, which I still think is the best bookstore I've ever been to. Not only for its book content, but it's the jewelry, some of the clothing, the foods, and then specifically the video and cassette tape based lecture tapes that would contain all of the Africana world leading thinkers of the 20th century. And I would spend countless hours driving, delivering pizzas, going back and forth between lecture tapes, mixtapes that I would, be getting from various DJs whenever I could get them. And then what I was, without even consciously thinking about it, I was creating a whole new media space or media environment in my car. One that took me away from commercial rap music, commercial radio, and one that brought me into a whole different world intellectually. And right on, man. And then right on, man. I appreciate that. Shout out to Baba Nati too, man. Who runs and owns Everyone's Place. And I'm gonna get to that. So eventually, when I, and that's another reason why I really like this book, because while it's based on my PhD dissertation, it's really an expression not only of my true politics, but also some of the activist and practical or pragmatic journalistic work I was actually trying at least to do. So when I became a member of I helped co-found a group called, first of all, I became a member, and he's mentioned in here, shout out to the late Damu Smith, who, among other things, gave me the line that I'm not doing daddy daycare, I'm raising my child. But he was the founder of, in DC at the time, of Black Voices for Peace. And much like Black Alliance for Peace, the politics were, largely similar: internationalists, Black radical, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist. Though at the time, some of us, with all due respect to Damu, younger at the time, we thought it wasn't radical enough. We thought, so we actually formed what was called Organized Community of United People, or Organized Coup. And the attempt there was, we were thinking we were going to be sort of the SNCC break off from the BVP, more mainstream civil rights leadership movement, which I'm not saying that Damu and BVP were. I'm just saying that was, in our maybe youth and arrogance, what we, or desire to be more overtly, aggressively militant. That was what we thought. So and in service to that group initially, not as a DJ, I've never been a real DJ, but as a lover of DJs and of mixtapes, I wanted to create or use the tradition of mixtapes to both advance the work of our organization. So initially creating mixtapes and then just selling them, to raise funds, but then eventually trying to say, well, what if we turn the mixtape into itself a sort of radio show that contains all the mixes of radical hip hop you don't hear on the radio, which both, sort of highlights the actual relationship we have to this society and why our media looks the way it does, but then also exposes people to the lie of commercial media and music industry that claims that there isn't anything better or more radical being produced. But that would also tap into these traditions of, we don't need the radio. I don't want to be on the radio. Again, from my pizza delivery experience, I wasn't listening to the radio, or was desiring not to listen to the radio and to turn on mixtapes or radical lecture tapes. So I'm thinking, let's create a mixtape radio, use the CD as a mass distribution underground communicative network to not only promote the ideas contained, but also journalistically the work of the organization. That was at least the goal. So we started, it started Free Mix Radio, the original mixtape radio show. What's up, Leah? Thank you very much for making it. And Free Mix Radio was the initial. And I would, I got into the whole thing. I tried to get some DJ equipment. I tried to learn some basics. I started going to all the where all the DJs at the time were going for their stuff, to the like the, what were they called? Like the, what are they called? Like, like the traveling road shows with all this, what are they called? That have all of the like the bulk CDs, the bulk blank CDs and the cases. And I would go to these things and get a whole bunch, and got a label maker and a 14 and a 7 stack CD burner, so I could try to replicate the mass production of these CDs. And saying, and to me, to this day, it's like my favorite project. Like, we're creating, and with the philosophy of emancipatory journalism that just basically says that people in struggle against colonial experiences not only join organizations, but produce media from within those organizations that is meant to expand the reach and impact of those organizations. So I was thinking, man, the mixtape is going to be the emancipatory journalistic arm of Organized Coup, and it just felt so good. Now, I'm not a DJ, so the mixes and all that, it never got to the height, the quality that I fantasized. I was never really able to lock in routine involvement of DJs. A shout out to DJ Underdog, who in DC at the time produced one of the greatest mixes of a free mix ever. But I wasn't able to actually concretize that relationship, which was initially the goal, to get not so that I could help provide some of the journalism, but an actual DJ would be doing the mixes. And I think part of it was the lack of revenue. Part of it was, I think I didn't always properly convey the idea, or frankly, some just didn't agree. They just didn't like, like I remember somebody said, because initially the mixtapes would be funded by the organization and given away for free. And I remember somebody saying that they were turned off by that, because if something is given away for free, then it suggests that the people creating it don't really care too much about it, or it's not as good. And I thought that was always interesting. So there was actually, in the dissertation, there's actually, I think, if I remember correctly, an actual chapter on the philosophy of free exchange, where I was trying to argue. It didn't make it to the book, but I was trying to argue why giving it away for free was the right idea, and also trying to address why some would respond that way. But that was also part of it. And the other reason that this book to me is so important and is that, again, it's not only the most, I think, still to this day, accurate reflection of my politics and worldview, but it was produced at a time where I was really, at least initially when it was written, I didn't have, the babies hadn't started coming yet. I was still more active in, in actual, not virtual meetings so much, but in person, in streets type of work. And I was convinced that, yes, I'm going into academia, because I was just going into, had come back from the Africana Studies and Research Center grad program, but I was on my way into the PhD program at the University of Maryland. So I was like, I know I'm headed in that direction, but I remember I even told my wife, I was saying, I don't expect to ever get tenure. I expect to have to move around and compile a teaching career out of multiple area colleges and universities. And as such, I didn't want to pitch this book to a university press. I didn't want it to be attached to the academic apparatus. I didn't want it to be hidden behind expensive paywalls. I wanted it to be, in my mind, my fantasy was that people who were engaged in all forms of activity would have this book stuffed in their pockets, the way when I was younger, I used to have, Wretched of the Earth or something, Malcolm's Autobiography folded and stuffed into my, work pants or something like that. I remember, I was like, that was the fantasy, at least. Like I want this book stuffed in somebody's, not reading it in an office and in a classroom so much, but reading it like in the like literally they have fantasy, like people like in the jungle, like Che in the like guerrilla style teaching, like that was, But anyway, Chris, that's why I'm saying I didn't want to. I thought at the time I was thinking an academic press is going to make it too bougie, too expensive, too edited. I felt like they were going to try to edit out some of the arguments. I was like, I just, I didn't. And then specifically, I also wanted it to come out on a Black press. So I was trying to stick to certain, a certain philosophical solidarity. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I didn't, so I was like, I don't want to go to academic press. I remember that's always, of course, part of the conversation, especially when you're coming out of grad school and you're trying to publish your dissertation as your first book. That's, for your career, that's the better thing to do. And as I'll come to, I don't know if this could have gotten into, it would have taken a lot of work for this to be turned into something that I think they would have published. But I was like, nah, I don't want it. I wanted to come out on a black press. I wanted to be kind of like this, a small paperback stuffed in somebody's back pocket while they're out there doing something. And then when they need some inspiration or some back, they like, yeah, like that's because when I go back, and even as I was rereading some of this for today, when I go back, like I get that feeling. So that's why I feel like on some level I was successful, at least in conveying a certain energy. But anyway, so I wanted to come out on a black press. So initially I reached out to Paul Coates at Black Classic Press. I reached out to Hakeem Adabudi at Third World Press. I reached out to, I'm forgetting the name, but I sent it to Africa World Press. And I said, and because I said, look, and at the time I had written the whole thing. So I had changed it up from the dissertation, added some things, done some things with it that I thought made it sort of pointed it in a better direction. But I said, here's an entire manuscript. So I'm not just even sending you a chapter, like, here's the whole thing. Can we, where are we with it? What do you, can we at least, my point was, could we at least engage in a beginning of a relationship that would turn the draft into something they would be willing to publish? Well, unfortunately, I didn't hear back from any of them. Not a word. Africa World Press initially seemed excited and said, send me the manuscript. Then I never heard from him again. Black Classic Press, not Paul, but was it Sister Natalie? Somebody politely said, this isn't the kind of thing we do. And then I never heard back from Third World Press until way after the book was already published. And then after the book was published, more than like a year and a half, almost maybe 2 years later, I heard back from Third World Press to say that they weren't interested. So I was like, wow. And no explanation, by the way. So this is why I was saying, like, when you watch The Last Dope Intellectual and Dr. CBS talk about the writing process, if you want to go in this direction, you should listen because I think the workshopping she did, the way she's, the proposal development, all of that is much better than what I did here. So admittedly, I was disappointed in the response, but I thinking back, especially now thinking back, I could maybe see somewhat why. So then the next best thing for me was the white left presses that I saw, particularly in activist spaces that I might pass through from time to time. So ultimately, that's how it ended up with AK Press, because everywhere I went, not only did AK Press have a lot of radical stuff on their catalog, but they published even a good deal of Black radical thinkers as well. So that's how I ended up there. Now, the problem with that was, and I see some of the questions coming. I will get to them. Please keep them coming. I'm going to come back and get to them all. The problem was that, so as I said, I sent AK Press the full manuscript, a draft. And the initial email I got back was very exciting. I have to admit, I remember it. I couldn't find it, but I do remember the tone. And it basically was saying, we're excited about the manuscript. We want to publish it. It went on to say something to the effect, we have a small, editorial staff, but we want to work with you to get the manuscript ready. All this good stuff. I was like, great, let's move. And then I'm thinking also, my career was starting. I had taken a new position at Morgan State. This by now was 2009, I think. And I was already late, by the way. So I had graduated from I had left the PhD program, graduated from the PhD program in 2005. And immediately, like, I was defending my dissertation, and my wife was like 8.5 months pregnant, who, by the way, also through 2 pregnancies went to law school, passed the bar. and much more impressive than what I had to do. But the point was that immediately after the dissertation, after my graduation from the PhD program, the baby started coming. And honestly, I just didn't have the levels of discipline I would be required to really hone back in, focus, get the work ready, do all the things that I think should have happened to push the project along and to do it fast enough. And I was, thinking I would take more time. It didn't have to rush. I blink, I wake up a few years later, two wonderful, beautiful baby girls later. And it's already, I'm already 3 years into my job at Morgan, and they're already talking about tenure review. They're already talking about, and I'm starting to honestly become faced with the realities that challenge my previous, position in terms of not chasing tenure and expecting to bounce around and all that stuff. And honestly, it changed. I was thinking, this is not going to, I need, and plus I was thinking at the time, I'm at Morgan State, I'm in Baltimore City, I'm teaching Black students from the African diaspora in an all Black environment, or a mostly Black environment. Why not try to stay here? At the time, the hierarchy I was working with was supportive. I had, for a time, Dr. Burroughs was my office mate, my next door office mate. Dr. Mark Bolden worked at Morgan briefly on the other part of the campus, was coming through on a regular basis. Diedrich Muhammad was working downstairs and would come through at lunch breaks. So the office space was hot. Like, it was like my friends were there, my colleagues, like we're building, we're talking, we're debating, we're arguing, like all the stuff that I would want to do as part of my life and job. We're doing all that. Then even MK Asante showed up and initially was popping around, and so it was like this whole little, it was just like boys club, admittedly, at least for the most part, until it was mostly boys club for the oh, really? Oh, I didn't realize. Is that true? I thought that this was showing up in everybody's wherever. Okay. Sorry if it was hard to find, but appreciate you making it. So anyway, but I'm sitting there, I'm at Morgan, I'm saying, like, I don't think I want to leave. I think I should try to stay here. So, and if I can do it while, with using the work I'm already doing, then let's do it. So I did, anyway, so that's why I ended up just saying, look, I got to get this published. Let me, eventually, I'm not hearing back from these Black presses. Let me sign up with AK. It's as close as I can get. They're willing to work with me to turn this into a better manuscript. Because again, I'm recognizing it's a draft I'm submitting. But then after that email and the basic saying, like, we're going to get back to you, hold tight, I don't hear anything. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, 7 months. And, I start to, like, what's going on? And I'm getting these vague, we're going through some flux, we're changing, some this, some that. And more than a year later, I'm like, look, you all signed it. We signed a contract. You said you were going to publish this. What's up? I need to get it published because I'm coming up for tenure. It was already now 2010. You've sat on this book for over a year. I'm coming up for tenure next year. I got to get this thing moving. All of a sudden, I get reassigned a new person I had never heard from before. She tells me that all the other people are now gone and it's a whole new situation. She starts with, like, a very, honestly, a negative, she starts off by saying, we did agree to publish it, but this is not usually the kind of work we publish. It's too theoretical. It doesn't this and that, and I'm trying to be polite. I'm trying to, but I'm saying, but you did sign the contract, and what's up with the editing? Am I supposed to be editing myself? Am I supposed to be rewriting anything? What's going on? We got a lot of work to do. She tells me, no, sit tight. We're working on it. And then by the spring of 2011, I'm like, or I should say by the winter of 2010, early 2011, I'm saying, you know, what's going on? We have to, and essentially she admits we've done almost no editing on the book. We haven't, you know, the structure, whatever, this, that, and the third. And I still, so I felt, honestly, I felt stuck. I felt frustrated and was like, you know, so we just got to go forward. So I did as much editing as I could quickly. She claimed to be doing some editing. I just didn't see it very much. And what ultimately came out in the spring of 2011 was the same draft I submitted almost more than a year and a half, almost 2 years earlier. So that's why there were still, like, as proud and happy I am with what I was trying to do, there are still a lot of things in the book that I struggled with that I wish had been taken care of, that I would have liked to taken care of, or had taken care of, or should have been taken care of, what weren't. So, for instance, and the biggest one, and there are others, but the biggest one is obviously I misspell Biko's first name. I mean, this is an incredibly embarrassing, infuriating. I apologize to him and the ancestors on a regular basis. All of the, how are you going to have, I mix what I like based on I write what I like, and you misspell Stephen, or you pick the other version and nobody catches it? Wasn't misspelled. I just spelled it PH instead of V. I don't even know. I don't even, there's no excuse. It's no excuse. I can't even blame that on the lack of editing. You know what I'm saying? I can't even put this on AK Press. This was just a horrible, horrible mistake. The other thing that I think is that I have on my list of the bad is that, you know, I always struggle with writing organization and organizing my argument. And I'm always, at least I feel like I'm constantly trying to draw connections and put things together and pull disparate pieces together that seem to work in my head for me, but don't always come out orally or in print the way that I would like. And I don't have the writing skill that others have to overcome that. So there's a lot that I think could be edited. Like, I needed some editing help. I needed to really sit down. Like, again, when CBS is talking about the writing workshops and the levels of engagement she invites, I definitely needed to do more of that. I thought I was going to get it through the press, but especially looking back now, I should have dealt with that long before even engaging the press or any press itself. So the other thing is, even though I did the right thing of saying, because another thing I'm very proud of with this book is that, and I tried to work this out with AK Press to give all the proceeds. They didn't want to go for that, but I arranged that, or I just set it up that, or didn't. Well, I just arranged that all of the royalties that I got from the book went to political prisoner work. So to this day, I've never made a penny off the book. All of the money, every penny that has come to me from this book has gone to something. Support for Mumia, support for the Jericho movement, support for Freedom Archives, support for prison radio, support for, and it's not much. I'm not trying to, like, don't get it twisted. We're not talking life-changing money. We're talking about trinkles of revenue of royalty checks. Like again, like I say about my paycheck, I cannot make it rain. I might at best be able to make it mist. So I've sent some mist. But I admittedly was trying to create a standard to challenge other academics and authors, particularly those who want to write about radical politics and histories, but don't actually have those politics themselves, to say, look, I just wanted to have it out there as an example. I'm not saying, just to say, look, here's somebody who published a book that's saying every penny is going to political prisoners. So, but the flaw is there's not enough of the PP analysis in the book. Like if you go back and read Sophia Bakari and Jalil Muttaqin, who thankfully is in relative freedom right now, and certainly Daruba, and if you go back and read all of these people, their analyses fit perfectly with what I was trying to do with this book. But there's not enough of it in there. Now, admittedly, because it's born out of a dissertation where we're in some ways forced to deal with academic canons, particularly in the communications field, or as I was at the time, or some other more traditional form of sourcing. It's not an excuse. It just should have happened. I also think that there could have been more that certainly as I look back 10 years, like more like on the thoroughness of the ideas. Maybe that's related to writing and organization of my argument to that critique, but I think there could have been more thoroughness of the ideas in terms of dealing with colonization. And I'll come back to this, but what I was attempting to do in my mind of synthesizing radical traditions of radical blackness and the European radical traditions that I'm moved by, mostly, of course, Marxism, socialism, and to say that there's more of a similarity and a way to synthesize that work without having to get into these constant ongoing debates over one is African-centered and one is Eurocentric. But anyway, and the last piece that in the one critique that I remember being said publicly by Sister Zan West, I hope she's doing well, so wherever she is, I believe out west. One of her criticisms was that the focus on the mixtape was by 2011 already outdated, that the digital world was taking over, making an argument for an analog hard copy distribution of a mixtape was passé. And I think in some ways that criticism is correct, although I was as much interested in drawing attention to the broader social political relationships and the context that we're in, as opposed to making a particular practical argument. But anyway. All right, so that's a quick summary of the bad. I do have somewhat of a longer list of good that I'd like to quickly focus on, some of which I've already covered in terms of how this to this day is my favorite. It's very special to me because, again, of what I was trying to do, that it represents most accurately my ideas in a public way, and is connected to a very, I think, original, practical, actual activist organizational effort that I had been involved in. So it was not based on theory without practice. It was not strictly so-called ivory tower. In fact, quite the opposite. This book to me represents an insurgent effort into the academy. It was me bringing the real work I was so happy to be in some ways involved in into the academy, and the response I got from the academy confirmed it. Oh man. Actually, I didn't even have that listed here. I'll just say quickly, maybe we can come back to it. I mean, College Park, they took my funding without telling me. The only reason I found out, I showed up one day, and because I had a good rapport with the sisters that worked in the office, because I guess I was one of the few people that actually spoke to them instead of just coming in to pick up their mail or ask them to do something. I came in one day and they were like, "What you doing here?" And I was like, "What you mean? What am I doing here?" And they said, "We got the paperwork that pulled your funding. We didn't think we'd see you anymore. We thought you were out the program." And I said, "What word?" I said, "That's news to me." And come to find out, they could not kick me out of the program because academically I was superior. But what they could legally do was just take my funding and force me to either get my own or leave. Thankfully, I was able to work out a job within the campus quickly to keep me there. But they took my funding. Then they physically removed me from my cohort and the work we were doing, stuffed me in an upstairs graduate student office, which is paradoxically where I found the stack of communication journal. I think it was the Journal of Communication journals set to be thrown away, which I thought was appropriate given the anti-intellectualism of the PhD program. And in that, I just happened to be thumbing through. One of them said something about emancipatory journalism. And I was like, that sounds hot. And come to read it, and Professor Shaw lays out this very anti-colonial approach to the practice of journalism and media making. I was like, word, that's going to work perfectly for the work I'm doing. Oh man, it was that whole College Park scene. That deserves a whole conversation itself. Again, shout out to Todd Burrows, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, Dr. Saswat Padianak, and several Dr. John Kirch. Talk about like when Kamal Franklin talks about the good white man, John Kirch would have been mine for my cohort, straight up. And shout out to the white Southern women whose two old white Southern women, one of which at least recently passed. Oh my goodness. How is that? How am I blanking out on her name? That's terrible. That's terrible. Kathy. Maureen Beasley was one, and Kathy McAdams was the other. My apologies. The late Kathy McAdams. Because I got to shout them out, because these two old white Southern women defended me, made it possible for me to stay there and complete the work. And what they were doing was, and they said this explicitly, in one way or another, their experience with hostility just from the male dominance led them to be overly supportive of all the rest of us oppressed groups who came through that program. They were fantastic. So it was the handful of clearly the white leadership, but even the black ones, that caused me and several others of us serious trouble. Oh man. Yeah. So but it was clear that it wasn't performance. Even the late Haynes Johnson, who used to pride himself on being one of the only father and son Pulitzer Prize winning teams who's published more than 13 books, and all he would say this in almost every class, and we would I felt like I was intellectually busting him up every class, called me into his office, said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm getting a PhD." But anyway, they wanted me out. They worked very hard to make me leave or get rid of me or whatever. It's where the leading media theorist, sociologist from Europe said that he had never read Du Bois and never heard of Fanon. That's who was sitting in judgment of me. And at the end of the dissertation process, I had to literally write him and others and say, look, the back and forth over the dissertation is over. I've proven my point. Sign off on it. You don't have to agree. That's not part of the project here. You don't even have to understand every single thing. I've met the requirement, sign off on it, and let me get out of here. And I did not even walk. I didn't even want to walk at the ceremony. It was such a hostile, I could not, was ready to get out of there. Anyway. So the other thing that I think was good about this book was that I did try to synthesize the African-centered work and the radical European traditions that were inspirational to me. And I still think it can be done. I just don't have the ability or the discipline to do it properly, frankly. So it leaves it undone, and it left me to some, I think, exposure for criticism and critique. For instance, I'll just say, when I read African-centered concepts of this, the spiraling nature of time and space, I feel like I'm reading for the African world what Marx was trying to say in his own limited European context about, for instance, the flow of capital and its ability to traverse time and space as well, and the impact that has. So when Marimba Ani is talking about the impact of Yurugu, in a European sense, in a way that only he could do it, I feel like Marx is talking about capital. that capital in a European context is as disruptive culturally, societally, spiritually, etc., as is Urugu in an African context. So somewhere in there is what I was trying to synthesize. It didn't quite get there, but that's what I was trying to do. And to do that, I thought the use of my version, or how I was trying to craft it, the internal colonialism theory, was the way to do it. There's an article I cite in here. I can't recall off the top of my head who it was, but there's an article that pointed out in the Journal of Black Studies years ago that an analysis of settler or internal colonialism allows for Black America to be put properly back on the world stage of analysis and discussion, unlike traditional discussions of Black America isolated within the context of U.S. history does. And that appealed to me. And to me, it was no different than the African-centered critique of John Henrik Clarke, for instance, saying all of the colonial borders are created by Europe and divide us on those bases, and therefore we should reject them and the labels of us that they impose. So it also, that is the internal colonialist theoretical approach, allows for an incorporation, for me at least, of both materialist and a cultural appreciation. That is to say that part of the process of colonizing anyone is to distort the culture of those being colonized. So that has to be addressed, as does the African-centered world, the assault on African consciousness and history and experience and philosophy and spirituality. But at the same time, there's a material process to this that Marx and others lay out quite well, that Fanon, that Memmi, at least earlier in his career, that Césaire, that Martin Delany in his own way, that historically, that David Walker historically, that Claudia Jones historically in her version, all have tried to some way incorporate into their own work and offer as an analysis. And that's why I thought it worked for me. And then, so I didn't use internal colonialism as I think traditional Marx or Leninism would, more along the lines of Cedric Robinson or others, though he's not, I don't base my work on his either. So that's another, or I don't involve his work in here enough either. So that's another, but my point was, I was trying to, in a similar way, say, look, we don't need the traditional Eurocentric or Leninist or Marxist approach to settler colonialism. There is an African world tradition that addresses it, and I wanted to try to bring that in as well. Again, the other good is that the pizza delivery origins, the activist origins, the mixtape journalism origins, the emancipatory journalistic origins of the project. It attempts to argue for unsanctioned communication and organization. It was prescient on the argument around internet freedom. As even a few have contacted me over the years and even recently to say, I think I was wrong in condemning, because I'm sitting there saying the internet's not going to save us. And all you rappers and journalists that are talking about the leveling playing field of the internet, that's not going to work. So I was prescient in that. I think I was right on that. Same thing with the music industry. A lot of the argument I got at the time was, oh no, I can sell it online now. I can put my music out online. I don't need the music industry anymore. That's definitely not true. It's more consolidated than ever. And musicians are paid less per digital download than they were for sale of their art beforehand. And YouTube, the biggest music distributor right now, is run by Lear Cohen, the same dude that was destroying hip hop for centuries. I believe even discussed in here a little bit in the context of Bumpy Knuckles. My favorite rap nickname, by the way, Bumpy Knuckles. What else? A couple other things, and then I'm gonna get to the what you all have. Yeah, look at with all the Twitter repression going on now. Again, what I was saying here about alternative, unsanctioned, even Analog forms of communication are really important. I think I was right in terms of all the arguments around the role of fame and celebrity. You could even go back and look at what we were just saying about the whole Killer Mike thing. And copyright. I think I was really prescient, or at least on time, or right on the issue of copyright as a colonial mechanism to limit our ability to communicate. Oh, and then lastly, the reason that Marx was one of the reasons why Marx factors as much as he does in here is because when going through the PhD program in comm studies at Maryland, one of the initial books we were given is a book about the so-called founding fathers of communication studies, and they count Marx as one. Freud is another, and I forgot who the others are. The problem, of course, is Marxist analysis was never really taught or incorporated into the academic project. If anything, is just there as a critique that's too big to fail and has to be mentioned. And because Marx was either such a prominently considered figure by European and American academicians looking to either in some way positively refer to him, but more likely disparage him, he's considered a founding father. So one of the problems that I ended up having at College Park was that, well, if he's a founding father that we're supposed to be aware of, I actually read his work. And that I happen to agree with a lot of the critique. It was another problem, but the initial problem was most of the people, including the faculty that ran the thing, didn't read his work. So whatever they thought of him was based on nothing. So the last part is someone I did see was asking if they could get a copy of the paperback. And at this point, I don't know. I don't think so, because one of the things that happened was with AK Press was that a few years ago, initially they had said, because once I realized that they were publishing essentially a rough draft, that this book is essentially just a rough draft. Unfortunately, it really was not a lot of editing, and certainly not the level of editing that it should have had. Once I realized that was happening, I said, so look, well, what about a second edition? When can we get to that? And their initial response was, well, once you cross 3,000 sales, you get into that range of second editions. Well, we hit that very quickly. Like that, as I told them, I was like, 3,000 is not going to be a lot just between, the academic community and the people I know using it. I mean, we're going to hit that pretty quickly. And in fact, I don't know about how quick, but we went well over, this is several years ago at the time, well over 3,000 copies sold. So I was saying, look, can I do a second edition? And at first I said, well, first I was thinking, can I do a second edition? And then when I got the email response I got was so cold that it sort of jarred me into the original space from before I went to AK Press. And I thought, you know what? I would rather have a conversation about reclaiming the copyright. And then I told them, I said, look, I said, look at how this process went. And then even after this process, I still sell all these copies, showing that there's an interest in what I've done here, at least. And the response to a second edition is really lukewarm at best. So let me just get the copyright. And if I do something else, it'll just be on my own. So that's what I did. So they're not publishing the book anymore. I own the copyright, which is why the PDF is free at iMixWhatILike.org. And, if I ever, I don't know. So, but honestly, really the biggest thing is the time and the discipline required to do the work and to do it right. And I haven't really had that for a long time. And that's why I never came back to it. But I every time I look at it, I think that it begs for an updated edition. There was so much right in this, and that I'm really proud of, that it really deserves a better, it deserves to have been better done. And a second edition deserves a level of work that I can't get to right now. I just don't have it. I don't have it. And I'll just say, frankly, I mean, a 4-course teaching load, and then trying to be an active parent and somewhat of supportive activist. And then just separately not having, I think even aside from that, the kind of discipline that it would take to do it right, I don't know. So, all right. Let me go back and see what's what here. Again, I really appreciate you coming through. And supporting BPM. Mostly, that's what this is all about, and just trying to show some support for you all. Some shout out to you all as well. But yeah, that was why. Yeah, I think I covered that. Why not an academic press? I was trying to, keep it in my fantasy. I wanted it to be something else. Africa World Press is rather academic. I heard that. I thought I would have at least heard of your book is whack, the manuscript is too damaged, or it's not fixable, or we don't like what you're doing, or I don't know. I wanted to hear something, and I didn't hear anything. So I don't know why they didn't. I don't know why any of them wouldn't want to. So that's why there isn't or hasn't been a new edition. They didn't. I think AK Press didn't want to really, support it the way, and I didn't. And then I kind of didn't want to reward them with another, 3,000 bookseller. Oh yeah, man. No, I have very little trouble admitting my issues with writing. I don't think I think actually in general with everything. I think I'm like, honestly, I'm like a B+, A- in everything, or a lot of the things that I do. So I'm not like I'm pretty good at several things. That is, I'm not really great at anything, and I don't have the kind of love for writing that real writers have. So I really do struggle organizing my thoughts, even when I write outlines, even when I, take notes, even when I think I'm giving myself time. When I go back, I just have a hard time. And then I go and read somebody else's work. So for instance, I don't mind saying, so like the other, a couple of weeks ago when for her show, I was looking at CBS's book, just her book proposal for Black Scare, Red Scare. And on the one hand, I don't think she's trying to do all of the things I was trying to do with this book, which is probably a good thing. But at the same time, she's dealing with a lot of heavy lifting theory and ideas. And yet, when I read the book proposal, it makes sense. It flows. Some of it maybe I have to reread, or I struggle with some of the language or some of the concepts. But that's on me as the reader. It's not for some sort of lack in her presentation. In fact, it I don't know. Anyways, when I read other people's work at that level, and I do acknowledge that there are different levels with this, they seem to be very clear. And to be able to deal with very complex concepts clearly. And I see I'm lagging here, so I'm going to see if I can let it catch up real quick. So yeah, I don't have a problem admitting that for sure. I actually appreciate the ways the book expanded on colonialism, because it was really my first introduction to being applied outside of government. So I appreciate that, Ricky. And you've always been, even before I knew who you were, you've always been a supporter of the project and offered up a lot of kind words and supportive words. And I appreciate that, because usually there's a lot of silence, or just there was a lot of good or a lot of criticism. I shouldn't say a lot of criticism, or either I got silence or criticism. There wasn't a lot of certainly public praise. So I appreciate that. And I was trying, again, I'm glad I tried, especially in the context in which I was working. Because again, I'm trying to say, well, for the way it actually went was, and I hope this is coming through all right, but the way it actually went was, when I found the journal article with Emancipatory Journalism, and I read that, and I said, wow, I said, this is what I've been trying to do with the mixtape. But how, in terms of the dissertation or the coursework, how am I going to apply an anti-colonial theory to Black America when, for the most part, Black America is not considered a colony? So that's what brought me into the traditions of all these people having already made that point. And I found much more than I even realized, and was even at one time like, why haven't we ever been exposed to all of this? Or why hasn't this been made more clear in the way we are taught some of these histories and figures? So that's what so part of what I was trying to do with the book is to say, look at all the different ways people have been making this point without saying it or saying it differently. Kwame Nkrumah said capitalism is the practice of domestic colonialism. Du Bois had his semi-colonialism. You know, Malcolm did his colonial thing. Certainly Touré had his Africans are colonized everywhere argument. So, I mean, you know, yeah, mist is good sometimes. Right on. Yeah, I hear you. But if you want rain, then mist isn't really so good. Well, the mixtape is outdated in that nobody listens to cassettes or CDs anymore. So even the mixtape concept has been pushed online and in many ways forced to succumb to what that means in terms of access, content, availability. So the argument certainly when Zan wrote it back 10 years ago or whatever was, you know, you're centering as part of your argument the rap music mixtape, but the mixtape doesn't have the same importance anymore. So yes, in hindsight, I think having read it when I did really helped me develop the language and making global and domestic colonialism collections clear. Right on. I'm glad. And clearly you are clear today. So right, see how the universe works. Yeah. Well, no. Well, in part, yeah, I guess you could say that I'm paying for the doctor because I'm literally still paying for the bill. I mean, I'm still paying for the loans, and the way it looks, I don't know that I'll ever not be paying for the student loan. So, but the pun could also be developed that I'm also paying for the doctor because I'm still paying the price politically. And by the way, one of the associate dean at College Park who played a front seat role in trying to ruin my experience, it turns out is a very close friend to this day of someone at Morgan who has been trying to play that same role vis-a-vis my experience there ever since he showed up. So that point has come kind of clear to me in the last few years, and it was like, wow. And I don't think it's that much to think that as these two would see each other in certain spaces and communicate, that my name wouldn't come up and one wouldn't say to the other, I think you should find ways to keep messing with this dude. So that's right. And Hood Communist is exactly right. If your analysis doesn't start with settler colonialism, you're already wrong. And that's right. That is absolutely 100% correct. And that was, you know, obviously I wasn't making it in this way, but that was one of the biggest problems that I had with the university at the time, was because to do that, to center settler colonialism, you have to, you know, obliterate all these mythologies about American exceptionalism, democracy, freedom, liberty, so on and so on and so on. And obviously, establishment folks, white or black, don't want that. They don't want that. Well, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Definitely appreciate it. That's it. And what did Bumpy Knuckles said? I should have smacked his ass when I had something like that. I should have choked him when I had a chance or something like that. But I mean, but he's back running YouTube, so I mean, it is, Def. Yeah, right on. This is another good point, actually. And I also want to note I've read this book with Dr. Charity Clay's Say Word Book Club as a collective, which I think helped me understand what was being communicated more. Yeah, she did a really, man, you know what? Shout out to her. She was really nice and supportive as well. And even produced I think that was like a chat document from one of the book club conversations. How did your approach to writing change between iMWiL like and MBB? That's a good question. I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think my approach changed enough. And but I will say this: when I the myth of Black buying power was ultimately written. This is 2021. This is mid 20. Wait. This is 2021 just started. Last year was 2020. So for most of 2019, that's incorrect. The second half of 2019. So this is what happened, and why I think the approach didn't change enough. And again, why I keep coming back to this, but again, why I think Dr. CBS's writing workshop, when she does those segments about the research and writing process, it's really important. But the same thing happened. I had submitted the book proposal for the buying power to, actually, that's a whole other discussion. Oh man, I wasn't ready for that question. So the shortest answer I can give, and that this is oh man, because this is some more contradictions. How do I best describe this? Look, I don't know how else to do it. So frankly, I've been going through a lot of drama at the university for the last 7 or 8 years. And I mean, a lot. I mean, it's crazy, actually. It's kind of crazy what faculty end up having to suffer behind the scenes is crazy. And I was trying to find a way to, as they sometimes say, write myself out of the problem. The only project I could have been close to was the buying power book, because I've been working on it slowly here and there for so long. But my thinking was, at the time, the book is too short and too much of a direct argument to again be used as to be submitted for an academic publisher, and I don't have the time, and I don't have the energy or the space intellectually to write in a university press publication. So I went to the second tier and said, so Palgrave is considered, at least at the time, a second tier publication that counts towards tenure. Advancement is considered to have some reputation. It is a peer review publisher. So a couple of years ago, I submitted a proposal to Palgrave and didn't hear back. Forgot about it. When the drama at the university kicked back up again, I reached back out to them and said, anything moving on this proposal? Otherwise, I can maybe ship. And a new editor got back to me, very enthusiastic with the whole timeline, the whole thing. So I moved, but it had to happen pretty quickly. And I was only given about 80 pages to work with. And so knock it out over the summer of 2019. Now, at the time, within the University of Morgan, I was situated within the Institution for Urban Research, which itself is another part of the drama. But at the time, for at least that moment, I did not have a teaching load and was not slated to have a teaching load going into the fall of 2019. So when I signed off on the book proposal, I'm thinking I got a bulk of the summer and all of the fall to meet the January 1st deadline. A few weeks later, Morgan changed its relationship, its tune, took me out of the Institute for Urban Research, put me back in the School of Journalism and back with a 4-4 load, even though I had a book contract. I want to say that again. They took me out of the Institute for Urban Research, put me back in the School of Journalism, and put me on a 4-4 teaching load, meaning 4 courses as a full professor. Two of the courses I was forced to teach were courses I had to cover because the faculty slated to teach them left abruptly. So that said, I say all that to say my process didn't change, or my approach to writing didn't change enough, because it again was back into a rushed so that's why there are a number of issues with the Buying Power book, frankly, that aren't, it's right. It makes argument, it proves, it does everything it needs to do, but it could have been a few steps or levels better. But again, I'm limited just on my own with writing and organization and discipline, but then to have it be abruptly done around a 4-course teaching load, and by the way, a lot of other hostility, I did the best I could. So no, it didn't change as much, but what I did try to do was I did try to send the draft out. Like I did try to hit certain benchmarks. So in this sense, I was in some way following what I think CBS has laid down as a model. Like I set certain timelines and benchmarks, and I came close to meeting them. And I was able to send out some drafts to people to review. Frankly, I think I should have, I deserve better from some of the folks in getting back to me. Some folks didn't in time, but I was asking them to do a lot quickly. So, I mean, that was a difficult situation. Big shout out to Dr. Kwesi Konadu, who was given a shout out in the book initially, but the final version of the Buying Power book does not include A, the epigraphs, which caused problems, and B, the dedication, which included a shout out to Dr. Kwesi Konadu, because he was one of the few that I reached out to who really got back with a lot of notes and thoughts. And I think had I had even more time, could have made the Buying Power book even better. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question. But my approach didn't change yet enough. Well, I appreciate that. Look, but I struggle with the humility. It's not humility. It's objective analysis. It's like, it's just objective. It's just fact. It's honest. It would be absurd for me to describe myself as an A+, anything really, scholar, activist, journalist, father, husband, even really. I mean, might have dipped down to a couple minuses there too, here and there. But I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty A+ with the fatherhood and the husbandry. But no, but it would be absurd to say it otherwise. In the face with even some of the people that I work with on this channel, or in my private life or elsewhere, who I read. So and I want to win. So if we have to have, like Sophia Bakari said, if we're revolutionaries, you have to submit yourself to the rapier knife of revolutionary criticism. And if I'm walking around here thinking of myself as an A+ scholar, so it's not really humility. It's, at least that's not how I think of it. It's just what it is, man. It's just real. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's just. So I used to joke all the time. You know, like there was a year when I was working with Black Agenda Report. There was, for some reason, it felt like there was like a year in particular. It felt like that. I don't know, where I was just being invited all the time to cover panels or spaces that Glenn Ford couldn't make, or Bruce Dixon couldn't make, or later Margaret Kimberly couldn't make. And I was happy to do that, but my joke was, you know, I'm in the league, but I'm trying to get 6-man off the bench award. So you know, because I get it in the context of Black Agenda Report, or more broadly, I can't write like Glenn. I don't even think I can put certain analyses together like Glenn or Margaret or the late Bruce. So, you know, but at the same time, I'm arrogant enough to be like, I'm in the league though. I can come off that bench. I'll keep the rhythm going. I'll get you some points. I might even get you the lead back before the starters come back in. And if you catch me out there on the playground, you're going to get embarrassed. But in the context of the league, it is what it is. So wait, who do I have to have on here? Who did I miss? Who has to come on here to talk about Africa? You talking about Dr. Charity Clay? Is that who you're talking about? Yeah, then let's make it happen. Whoever you talk about, if you're saying they got to come on, we will make it happen. It doesn't matter. Go Bears, yeah. How do you advise your undergraduate students seeking to pursue higher degrees in Black or Africana Studies to enter academy, HBCUs, or PWIs? Usually my first suggestion is to go where the labels are less important in terms of the universities and whatever. Go where you will be socially comfortable and happy. If you are in a space where you have family, friends, political comrades, or, you know, if you just need to be, you know, where you get sunshine, or what, you know, you have geographic temperature needs, you know, consider that. That's often my advice, because whether it's dealing with difficult faculty or just difficult work, you're always going to run into difficulty. And the more you can rely on being in, you know, when I was in Ithaca, very difficult space socially, it was great for me to focus on work, but Ithaca is gray. You know, they had to build fences and on all those bridges because the white folks were jumping off and killing themselves on a regular basis because it's always gray and it's just in a lot of pressure. And so, you know, I would always, you know, as much as I love the Africana Studies and Research Center, or loved the version I went to, I would often encourage people, but you got to think about being in Ithaca. A lot of people don't do well up there. And at the same time, if you can find an equivalent intellectual experience somewhere else, you know. The other thing that I said is that I've often felt that I've seen more Black unity among small Black populations at PWIs than I've seen at HBCUs. And I've even had, you know, for years, have this discussion with my students all the time. A lot of students come to Morgan looking for that HBCU Black experience, and some get it and have a great time. A lot of, you know, but some often find, you know, I'm not really feeling it. I'm not getting it here. And in part it's because of the nature of the campus, the size, the commuter, city, urban based nature of the campus. But when I was at Western Maryland's Frostburg State, where there was only about 600 Black students out of about 6,000, 5,000 out there in Western Maryland, it felt like there was more cohesion and unity among that Black population than I've seen. So I think that has a lot to do with it. Then I often encourage people to, you know, if you can, really look at the programs, look at who's there, look who's publishing, what they're publishing, what kind of work they're publishing. Yeah. So that's at least some of the advice I'm proving your point. What point? Whose point? Maybe I'm. Glenn is my personal favorite in that crew for real. Dude is cold with his analysis and debating skills. Yeah, he is. Glenn is, yeah, Dr. Clay. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Let's do that. I need to catch up with her anyway. The story, what's the story behind the cover of I Mix What I Like? Yeah. Good question. Good question. It turns out, and I liked it, but I didn't pick it. I got to give AK Press credit for that. They found the artist who commissioned, I forgot the name. I think it's in here somewhere. Oh, by the way, not only did they find the artist, because the original cover ideas I had, we couldn't recreate. Like the initial idea I had was like a photo, like a shot. I can't even like of an urban street with like kids playing and like the shot of a tennis, like a foot, like so you could see a tennis. It was like I wanted it like to create this like whole like hip hop like. But this I thought turned out very well. I really like this, and but with the coloring and the hand on the turntable, and I mean I thought this turned out really well. So I got to give them credit for that. I didn't. But the other thing, I'll share with you. Glenn did blurb the book. We were still tight at the time. Ward Churchill. I forgot Ward Churchill wrote a blurb, which was interesting. And I thought very, very. I appreciated that. I appreciate Ward Churchill's work. And Natsu Saito, his partner. She is dope. But the one thing that is, I got to tell you, is Fugazi, is dear brother Boots Riley, who I deeply appreciate, love his work, love his all this stuff. But his blurb here is publisher inspired. So when he says, with this book, Jared Ball correctly and cogently posits hip hop in its rightful place as the most important literary form to emerge from the 20th century. It's a good, vague blurb. It has nothing to do with what I actually said here. But they felt it would help push the book to have his name attached. And because he was associated with AK Press at some point or some level, they got him to, and where people are considerate of your work. Oh, I'm sorry. What am I missing here? What am I missing here? What is the, hey, Renegade Farrell, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Oh yeah, no, yeah. What did Glenn write? The value of a committed revolutionary PhD with an ear for the truth and skills on the mic and turntable, priceless. Oh, okay. Yeah. Think about who's there. Think about where it is. Think about what your life will be like as you live in that place. Definitely think about the cost. And maybe be a little more thoughtful about the future than I was. Although when I look back, honestly, in all seriousness, we are being punished by the student loan debt. Like me and my family are being punished at this point. I have to say that. I have to acknowledge that. And it's insurmountable. I just don't see how we would ever get out of it. But when I do think about it, I have to say, when I think about the time in grad school, aside from here and there, going home and maybe delivering some pizzas to get some quick cash, I was able to live in relative poverty, but not have to work. And in the years from like 90, like 99, like 95 to 2005. Yeah. That 10-year period, I did so much reading. I was so engaged. I was, at least intellectually, everywhere. So I know it sounds like an old man, typical old man stuff, but honestly, when I sometimes see some of these younger folks like in BAP or elsewhere and killing it, I'm like, I just am reminded, I probably had not reached their level, but that's how I felt. You read that? Yeah, I read that. And I read that, and that. When we would get the assigned work in grad school, and one of the reasons why I was so much of a problem, particularly at Maryland, I didn't just read the assigned work. I read all the footnotes. I read the stuff they cited. I would like DJ's crate dig. I would like footnote dig. And I would spend hours in libraries, hours in wherever reading and there were no children. I didn't have to raise anybody. I didn't have any time. Nobody was looking for me in the same ways that they do now. Like, it was so beautiful. So I had to say, like, I can't be too mad at it. I can't be too mad at it. Like, the debt is crushing. But the intellectual room that it gave me to not have to work, I mean, I can't front. I loved it. So, listen, again, we a good 90 minutes in. I really, I see I'm lagging here. I'm sorry about that. I don't really know what to say about that. I did all the things, whatever. But listen, again, to the members who are here, who will see this later, I really appreciate you. This BPM project for me is as exciting as anything I've been involved with since I was doing this kind of stuff. The collectivism of it, it's like all I would ever want. So your membership helps us expand. None of us, we're all volunteering. None of us are sustaining ourselves with this. Everybody at BPM is volunteering and trying to put in as much time as possible. And the more revenue we generate, the more we'll be able to do and to redistribute to others so that they can help us. Because that's, from my point of view, that's really what it is. Like the journalism, the editing, the all that stuff is just stuff you can't ask people to do without compensation of some kind. Yeah, there was I think that's it. Was there anything else? I don't think I missed anything in terms of so look, again, I thank you all very much. I really appreciate you coming through. I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the kind words about the work. I look forward to hearing more. Obviously, this doesn't have to be the end of the discussion of this work or the ideas involved. Let's keep building, help BPM expand. So again, to the members who are here for this live, thank you very much. To those who will see this later, thank you equally very much. Invite others to get involved and let's keep it going. And again, thank you all for supporting this work. This is it still is my pride and joy with all of its flaws. I mean, that was one other thing I forgot to say. I'm sorry. So the chapter on white liberalism and progressive journalism, that editor from AK Press, I remember that became an issue. She wanted me to get rid of that chapter. And she said, she tried to couch it in that, well, don't you think that, she actually said, and this actually became an issue. She said, it's the same issue I had in the graduate program at College Park. For instance, they said, well, why don't you write, I remember one day that my PhD committee said, why don't you write an article about your project in advance of your dissertation for the New York Times about the mixtape and emancipatory journalism. It will really, this is what obviously all journalists want, is to be published in the New York Times. I think one or two of the professors there said we can maybe help that happen. And they hated my response because the first thing I said was, but that's not my audience. I said, no, I don't care about writing the New York Times. I said, I'm trying to talk to a colonized Black audience. They don't read the New York Times. They listen to mixtapes. So everybody around the table, one of those big, University of Maryland, big, conference room tables, they were all just like, just so disappointed. But anyway, so it was like that. So when this editor, she says, I just think your chapter on white liberals and progressives, I think you should consider, something like, do you sure you want that in there? Because that's your audience for the book. And won't they be offended or something along those lines? And I said the same thing. They're not my target audience. That's not who I'm talking to. In fact, even as I reread the chapter is again saying to what I think are Black and others among the colonized who were similar to me in the sense that we still engage white left media and journalism. Particularly at the time, almost out of necessity, we still watch Democracy Now! or McChesney or Project Censored or some of the other things I reference in here. And yet here are some of the shortcomings. So I was just trying to outline why, so as I think I said, the last paragraph of that chapter starts, and for the colonized, no one is coming. Renewed energy is needed in terms of media and journalism production and methods of distribution. Updated theory or perspective must be applied to political organizing because where attention is being paid to these issues, rarely are the concerns of the most oppressed truly a concern. See, that's a bad sentence. It's right, but it's a bad sentence. Mixtape radio is conceptually grounded in the need for the colonized to assume leadership within a broader social movement that uses media effectively as opposed to being marginalized within a media reform movement that assumes incorrectly, if at all, that the conditions of the most oppressed will improve with a moderately reshaped media policy. So anyway, yeah, she tried to get me to take that chapter out. I was like, nah, man, no way. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's not my audience. Now somebody to the point about my humility. Here's some arrogance for you. Here's some arrogance. I think Janine Jackson, the sister who does great work with Fair and Accuracy in Reporting, I think I didn't get an interview with Fair when the Buying Power book came out, because when she and I used to run into each other at these media reform circles, and as I interviewed and quote in this book, I would raise criticisms of Fair's coverage of Black issues. And I recount an exchange in here where she says more or less, because I said I ran into her. I remember we talked at one conference. I was like, why don't I said I was even talking again. I'm talking to a Black woman, and I'm saying, why doesn't Fair cover more? And I said, you cover, Palestine or the so-called Middle East way more. And she said, well, we are at a war. This would have been in 2005 or 6, shortly after the reinvasion of Iraq. And so my point was, when is the war against Black people ended? So like, the suggestion is that war is over. So there's my arrogance. I think I'm so arrogant enough to think that she not only remembered that exchange, but remembered it enough to say so many years later, you can't get interviewed about your new book. I don't know. Anyway, but I did want to make that quick point about the white left chapter. That story had to be told. Sorry about that. But yeah. Anyway, again, thank you all very much for joining me, for joining us, supporting Black Power Media. Please continue to do so. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Invite others to do so. And thank you very much again for all of this. I really appreciate it and look forward to much more. So again, as Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.